Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tavach and a good year. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer Tanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it is in honor and memory of Rab Moshe Pinchas HaKohen Katz, Olav Shalom, Rab Yosef Halevi Weinberg, Olav Shalom, and Rab Yael HaKohen Khan, Olav Shalom. It's also in schus and merit of Rab Zev Yecheskel HaKohen and Risha Katz, Le'erich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis, for many long, healthy years. We are in chapter 9 of Tanya, Perek Tes, where the Alter Rebbe is now summing up and concluding, after explaining 4 chapters, Beis Gimel Dalet Hey, 2, 3, 4, 5, about the divine soul, and 6, 7, and 8 about the animal soul, how these two now clash with each other. So essentially it's the battle within. The battle for what? For your and my faculties and garments. The faculties are our mind, emotions, and the garments are our thought, speech, and action, how we express ourselves. And the Alter Rebbe, in a very vivid way, and literally step by step, uses an example of a battle based on the verse in Kehelis that says that Ir Ktana, and the Gemara in the Dorim tells us, Ir Ktana Zeh Guf, the small city is the body, and its citizens are the Evorim, are the limbs of the human being, the limbs and organs of the human being. So imagine 2 kings, 2 leaders, 2 empires fighting for control over this city. And that's based on the verse, L'um Alum Yamatz, as he began, L'um Alum Yamatz, talking about Yaakov and Esav, that when one conquers, when one nation shall overpower the other nation, when one rises and conquers, the other one is vanquished, and vice versa. So we see there's a battle going on. So combining that battle and the city, we can understand the details and the stages of how one actually fights this battle and ultimately conquers the city. And as we'll see, and as we discussed, but we'll go over it in detail again, it's literally stage by stage, because you don't just conquer a city overnight. When a city that has been controlled by someone else, or has not been controlled by either of the parties, now when you want to control it, it doesn't just suddenly come subjugated. So there's stages of how that works. So first, Alter Rebbe, let's start with the mashal. We read this inside, but we're going to sum it up again. So he says, Ki haguf nikri ir ktanu, k'mo sheshnei melachim nilchomim al ir achas, like 2 kings fighting over a city, one city, because we're not talking about 2 cities, we're talking about 1 human being. Shekol echad reitzeh l'chavsha ulim lechaleh. Each one desires to conquer it and rule over it. Now every word is precise. Conquer and rule. When you conquer something, it doesn't mean you rule over it or govern over it. You can conquer something and no one's listening to you. But here it's more than just conquering. You want it to become part of a drive in your agenda. We're going to learn about how the divine soul wants it for its agenda, and the animal soul opposes it and wants it for its selfish agenda. So the divine soul is the king that wants the city and all those that inhabit that city to follow its rule. So to conquer the human being, including the animal soul, as we shall learn, also the enemy, but not just to conquer it, but to rule over it. Just let's keep in mind those 2 things that he said so far. In the mashal, this is all in the mashal. And then he continues, the hainu, this means lahani yeshver kiritzene. So when you say the word ulim lechala, more than just conquering, there's a meaning what that means. It means to govern its inhabitants according to his will. So in addition to conquering the city, and it could be a conquering that's completely against the will of the inhabitants, he wants them to follow the governance, the guidance of the king. And he continues and he says further, and that they obey every one of his decrees, every one of his wishes, everything that he decrees on them. Which is an additional point, all in the mashal and the example, that in addition to them conducting the inhabitants conducting themselves according to the will of the king, the ruler, the one that has conquered the city. So you want also to obey every command, every wish he has, everything that he decrees on them. So you see here several details: conquering, ruling over them, which means that they follow his will and everything, and they obey every one of his wishes that he decrees upon them. Then the Alter Rebbe goes now into the nimshal. In the nimshal, in the moral, Alter Rebbe adds more details as he breaks it down. But keep this in mind again. You have a city that's been undeveloped, let's call it, untamed. There's a battle over the city, in this case the body and the human being, and each one wants to control it, wants to conquer it and control it, and have the body follow the will and wishes of that respective leader. So now let's go back to the nimshal. So what are the two parties here that are at war? It says, Kach, so too the two souls that we've talked about began in the end of chapter 1, where he spoke about first the nefesh habamis, briefly, the animal soul. He calls it now hachiyunis habahamish klipa, from the klipa, from the shell, because its focus is not on the fruit, on the divine spark and the divine energy within, but on the shell, which in simple English means on its own selfish needs of survival. And the elikis, he begins actually with shtei nefoshes elikis, the divine, and the chiyunis, and we explained the difference, the energizing animal soul, because there's the element of being the biological force, and there's the element of being more like a Bahamis, which focuses on Behema on its own needs. So there's a battle, Nilchom zu im zu. They're at war, zoim zoi, ala guf v'chalei varav, on the body and all its limbs. Which, even though the Alter Rebbe just mentioned Iktana Zaguf, but the continuing Gemara talks and that the inhabitants of the city are the Evodim, which means it's not just the physical, just the body, the skeleton, or just the entire body, but the actual every limb, the arms, the legs. How will you use your hands? How will you use your eyes? How will you use your ears? All this is the battle of the animal soul, the divine soul, and the animal soul. Who will control? Who will dominate? So that's what the Alter Rebbe now is going. So then, here's the first time the Alter Rebbe introduces this battle. And we understand the battle because just earlier we learned that the place, the location of the animal soul is in the impulsive heart. So impulses, the impulsive emotions. The divine soul resides and its dwelling place is in the mind, the reflective mind, and in the right side of the heart. That's not driven by the fiery passions, but by giving oxygen into the blood. So you have these two forces at work, and these two forces are clashing with each other, as we see how our impulses clash with our intellect, with our reflective mind. Your mind tells you this is not necessarily a healthy thing to do. The heart chooses and is impulsive and wants to follow whatever whim that seduces it or impacts it. So there's a battle going on, and that's the kach, just as the battle between the two kings over the control of the city. And here he continues, and here he explains. So they're fighting over the body and all its limbs. V'ritzeino. Shalakis. I skipped the word. Shalakis, the divine. Chofzo v'ritzeino shetehil hi levadai meshalos alav umanhigosei v'chol he'ivorim. So the divine soul, desire and will. And we explain Chavtza v'Ritzena is sometimes considered the inner will, inner desire. And Ritzena is its will, its outer expression. So both are driven by one thing, godliness, the transcendence, the purpose of our existence, not our own needs of what is in it for me, but what is in it for God? Why am I here? So what is the divine soul, which is one of the kings in battle here? What is its desire? And the rest of the chapter, the rest of this section of the chapter is going to talk about the divine soul. And at the end, we'll go back to the animal soul and its interests. That's all the way to the end of the chapter. So the main focus is going to be, obviously, on the positive, which is what does this king want? Just as he said in the Mashal, that each king, the opposing kings, each one wants to conquer and rule over it. So here too, let's read the exact language. There he only said Reitzeh. Because in the Mashal, just a matter that the king wants. You're talking about the divine soul, it's more than just a want, it's an inner desire. Because the whole divine soul is simply saturated with the divine purpose and the divine energy within it. As we learned in chapter 2. Like a child from its father. It's a very part of the divine. So therefore it has both the will and the desire, or the desire and the will, we should say. So you see already the detail. There he just said, each one wants to conquer and govern over it. Here he said that it alone should be the meshalas, the exclusive rule over the person, over the person umanigose. Actually, let me read it correctly. Umanigose. That he wants that each one, that the divine soul, I should say, wants that it alone should be the control. Why does he add now it alone? Because he doesn't want a partnership. He doesn't want to say, no, half of it should be controlled by the animal soul. We're not doing a partnership here. The divine soul is focused only on one thing. It's a soul, an exclusive control. Now, Meshelas is Meshel Memshala can be, like we said before, conquering. You can conquer something against the will of the inhabitants of the city and its inhabitants. So he continues, Umanigose, to govern over it, Umanigose, to rule over it, and to govern over it. And then he continues, furthermore, V'chole evarim yisarim l'mashmaito, and that all the limbs, all the organs, all the parts of the body should obey and subjugate themselves to the sovereignty, mashmaito, to that divine will within the animals, within the divine soul. So you see now a furthermore level, not just that it is ruling as a moishel and governing like a manig, but more than that, that they should actually surrender and accept, berotzen, willingly. Somewhat, you can say, before he said the word Hameshalas alav, so what he said earlier, that corresponds to what he said, but then he said further, not just to conquer it, but to rule over it, which means lahani yeshver keretzene, which is sarim l'mashmaite. So here you have those two things as well. Umani gose corresponds to lim lecheleo, the hainu lahani yeshver keretzene, mani gose lahani, that it should govern over it, not just conquer it, and she is sarim l'mashmaite. In everything that he says, that everything should listen exclusively to the will of this divine soul as the king that has conquered the city. So you see these stages. So far we have covered 3 stages. The conquering, the governing, but not just governing that in a way you can say is compelled. So the conquering is completely, you can say conquering, but not governing at all. Governing not just in a way that's compelled, but saril mashmaita, that there's a desire on the part of the people in the city to follow this king. So you have here already 3 levels in the stages of conquest. Then he continues, Uptelim etzla. So not just they follow, but they're betelim, they're subjugated, they feel sublimated. In a sense, a form of like surrendering, but not a surrender by force. Betelim etzla, a sense of feeling humbled, you can say, even. Etzla legamri, completely. So that's a 4th level now, the bittul that the people in the city have. In this case, we're talking to the divine soul. And then he continues the next step, the 5th level. Umekove eleho. And that it becomes a merkava, a vehicle to that desire of the divine soul, to the rotzen and chayfetz, chavtze v'ritzein of the nefesh alekis. What's a merkava? What does that add to bittul? You could have bittul, you could, for example, have someone that you respect, someone that you honor, and that you subjugate yourself to that person. In a sense, you suspend yourself and accept whatever it is that the king wants you to do. A merkava is much deeper than that. A merkava means you become a vehicle. Your entire being is becoming a vehicle to what the leader wants, what the king wants. So in bittul itself, it's a deeper level. So that's level 5. Then he continues even furthermore, more than merkava. V'yiu levush le'eser b'chinesel v'gimel levusha niskarim. So the merkava could be a merkava is an object. When you say a vehicle, the vehicle is not part of the extension of the person that's riding in the vehicle. So the king has a vehicle, a carriage, a wagon, or whatever vehicle that carries him, so it's only following what he wants and is completely dedicated to that. Total bittul. But it's still something that's not him. When you say, for example, his arms and his legs follow his will, it's much more than merkava, because that just comes naturally, just an extension. When you say, move your hand, you say to yourself, I want to move my hand, it's not an outside force. Your arms and legs and all your evodim of the city, in this case, the inhabitants of the city, are become a levush. A levush to what? To the 10 levels, the 10 attributes, or the 10 faculties of the divine soul. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvur, Teferes, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus. The Gimel levusha and his 3 garments, thought, speech, and action, and his skarim that were discussed earlier in chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now we have a 6th level. So to go over again, so far we have Hi levada meshalos alav, that is itself should be the rule over the person, umanigose, and govern, and all the evodim and all the limbs should be saral mashmaita, that's number 3. Uptelim, bittul number 4. Umerkava number 5, a deeper level of bittul. And now levush, like a garment. So a garment, even though you can say a garment is also an outside factor, a jacket or a shirt, but it's not like a merkava, which is a completely separate entity. Also, when you talk about the physical body of a person, sometimes it's called a levush, a garment compared to the soul. But a garment follows completely the desire of the human being in a healthy person. So that's number 6. And what does it mean? He explains, sheyislapshu kulam be'evri haguf, that these 10 faculties that we just said, and not just one faculty, because we're saying it's a complete bittul, like a merkava, and like a levush, that the divine soul's desires all of them manifest the 10 faculties and the 3 garments of the divine soul, Yislap Shukulim, all of them manifest be'evri haguf. So here you have the divine soul, that's the king. The evri haguf is the city and its inhabitants. And what's happening here is that the desire of the king manifesting itself in the 10 faculties and the 3 garments of the divine soul the divine king, you can call it, like Yaakov, that manifests itself in the Evri Haguf. So it could remain apart. If the animal soul, God forbid, is controlling the person, so we still have a divine soul with faculties and garments, like we've learned. But it's not in control of the city. Here it's in control of the Evri Haguf. And the Alter Rebbe continues, V'yih haguf kule mole mehem levadam. So you could say this is a seventh level. It's not just a lavush, but the body is now completely filled with only the faculties and the garments of the divine soul. So even though he said lavush is bittul, even deeper than merkava, than a vehicle, but still, to say that guf kule mole mehem means there's no room for anything missing. It's a complete channel, not just a vehicle, but a channel, like a garment, to the divine soul's desires. And he focuses here, shemukuli mole mehem levadam, exclusively, only them. Similar to what he said before, but there he was still talking about control or conquering, and not that the body itself is cooperating or willingly sensing itself to be a vehicle and a garment. Now he's talking that it should be completely filled, because you could have conquering the city. There are many scenarios. You can conquer a city. You could even have part of the city accept the king and listens to all his orders willingly, and even joyously. But there still can be some people in the city, like you see in any situation, who don't accept the rule of the king. We're not even talking about whether they rebel, but they don't fully accept it. So you could have that levush, you could have a merkava and be a levush, but not kule. Here he says, "Yia guf kule mole mehem levadam." And it goes both ways. She'eslapshu kulam. All the 10 faculties and the 3 garments of the divine soul are now controlling the faculties and the garments of the human being. Meaning that our mind, and we're going to discuss, he's going to explain in detail soon, our minds and our emotions and their expression through thought, speech, and action is not just affecting some of the part of the city, which means part of some of the inhabitants of the Irktana Ze'aguf, but the divine soul, all of it, is manifesting in the Evri HaGuf, and the Guf Kule Moli Mehem Levadam. Levadam. They're the sole control. There's no other forces at work. There are no dissidents. Like you see in a city, very often you conquer a city, but you still see resistance. Either shooting or different pockets, and it's not so easy to subdue an entire city. Even if you control most of it, or all of it, you still can have pockets of resistance. But here we come to the level, the highest level here, that guf kuli mole mehem levadam. And now he adds, just to drive the point home, v'lo yaver zor b'seicham chas v'shalom. With no stranger, nothing else, no stranger interfering. Even a form of yaver. In Chassidus explains there's islapshus and there's maivid. Islapshus means when you manifest, you dress up in a garment. So you're affected by the garment is affected by you. Maivid means you're passing through. Here we're talking a situation that the king, the leader, the king wants to control the city, not just pass through peacefully, wants to control it. But you could have that the other side that was vanquished, the other king, maybe has been completely vanquished and completely eliminated as far as control goes, but maybe they're still passing through. You can still have a force, like I said, a foreign resistance, a dissenting voice that still remains. So he says, not only is it filled only with the divine, but lo yavezar, nothing else, no strange, other alien force, other force is interfering, God forbid. So that completes, and this is like the 7th, you can even call it an 8th level, The 7th level will be that it's completely filled. And the 8th is eliminating any smidgen, any detail of resistance at all. Had the Alter Rebbe not added that, you could say it's all filled, but still passing through, maybe there's still a force, there's still a voice that doesn't accept the divine soul. So with this, the Alter Rebbe concludes the moshel, the nimshel, the moral, from the example of the 2 kings with the divine soul, and literally spelled out, you see 7, I would say 8 levels, which is fascinating and also practical, because it means you don't have to conquer everything in one moment. When people are fighting their desires or temptations or other forces that are distracting us from our divine work, we sometimes feel it's all or nothing. It's not all or nothing. It's step by step. And you could take the Alter Rebbe goes all the way to the highest level, because even if some of us, or many of us, cannot reach these highest levels, it's still something we aspire to. You want to know what the destination looks like, what the goal is. That's why it's critical to spell it out. In actuality, we're going to learn that that most neshamas can't necessarily reach that level. That's a tzaddik gomer reaches the level of not just total sublimation and bittul, even more than merkava, but that there's no room for anything else. So this is setting the stage of explaining soon in the next chapters, Yud, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, respectively the tzaddik, the rasha, and then the beinani. But all of us have to know this, because all of us are aspiring. It's like you're running a marathon. So yes, some people will reach the destination completely, but all of us are expected to try our best. Later we'll also learn in Tanya that when you try your best, God helps and can actually give you more than you would have achieved on your own. But I don't want to jump the gun. We're not up to that yet. So now he spelled out the stages. So the first stage in practical and simple English would be where you allow the divine soul to speak to you. Let's say a person has been consumed with their animal desires. That's what your city and your inhabitants, meaning you, the person, the body, and its limbs and faculties, have been focused on yourself. The first thing is to realize there's another king in town, another sheriff in town. That's the divine soul. So even if it's not a completely conquering you and controlling you, the divine wishes, but you're allowing the Meshalaslo Manigose. And slowly you can go step by step and recognize, and that's the avodah of a person, as we're going to learn the details of how we do this in the next year, of how through our minds and through our emotions, through our contemplation and through our feelings, we can come to a point where we can climb and allow the divine soul to manifest within us. And each person at their level. But we have here all the steps. And we have a very physical example of conquering a city, as the Alter Rebbe explains. So we shall stop here. The next section is going to talk how this expresses itself in actual avodah. Basically, he's going to combine chapters 3, 4 and 5 even, but it's mainly 3, with this concept. Now that we understand the concept of the example of the battle, he's going to combine that with the contemplation and the emotions that are stimulated in our Avodas Hashem in the next year. Everyone have a very good Tavoch and a good Yor, a good gebenched Yor. TanyaApplied.com, you can find this and all previous programs archived, as well as a place where you can, a forum where you can submit any question. Good Tavoch.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.